HOA banned my simple fence design, so I built a massive fortress with a working drawbridge. What happens when a trivial disagreement over architectural aesthetic spirals into an all-out war, pushing a quiet individual to construct something truly audacious, forcing an entire community to question who really holds the power? My name is Ethan Vance, and my life had always been about quiet innovation, building things that were both functional and beautiful. My latest project was my home, a modest but charming craftsman-style house on a spacious lot in the Willow Creek Estates, a neighborhood ironically named given its complete lack of a creek. All I wanted was a simple, aesthetically pleasing wooden fence to enclose my backyard, primarily to keep my rescue beagle, Barnaby, safe and to cultivate my burgeoning collection of heirloom tomatoes without local wildlife interference. This seemingly straightforward plan, however, ignited an unexpected and intensely frustrating conflict with the formidable HOA president, Gwendolyn Hayes. Gwendolyn, a woman whose perfectly sculpted eyebrows and perpetually pursed lips seemed to convey a permanent state of disdain, ruled the Willow Creek HOA with an iron fist clad in a velvet glove. Her pronouncements were gospel, her taste impeccable in her own mind, and her capacity for micromanagement boundless. She decreed my chosen fence design, a classic vertical picket, was unacceptable, too rustic, and not in keeping with the elevated modern aesthetic of Willow Creek Estates. Her preferred alternative was a prohibitively expensive, purely ornamental wrought iron design that offered zero privacy or security for Barnaby. "Mr. Vance," she'd stated, her voice as sharp as her perfectly tailored blazer, during our initial architectural review meeting, "we simply cannot tolerate such pedestrian choices. Your proposed fence lowers the collective value of our properties. It's an eyesore, frankly. We are an exclusive community, and your quaint little project simply doesn't meet our standards. You will comply with the approved designs or face substantial fines." Her dismissive wave of a hand underscored her absolute authority, her eyes barely making contact, as if I were a speck of dust on her polished desk. Her arrogance was breathtaking. I tried to reason, to explain the practical necessity for Barnaby's safety and the practical benefits for my garden. I even presented alternative, slightly more ornate wooden designs, offering compromises that still met my needs. "Mrs. Hayes," I pleaded, holding up diagrams, "this is a standard, attractive fence. It's functional, affordable, and blends seamlessly. The wrought iron offers no real barrier for a small dog like Barnaby, and it's well beyond my budget." She merely scoffed, pushing the diagrams away as if they were contaminated. "Your budget, Mr. Vance, is not the concern of the HOA. Our standards are. Either you build to our specifications or you build nothing at all. And if you attempt to build anything without our express written approval, we will ensure it is torn down and you will bear the cost." Her resolve was chilling, absolute. The weeks that followed were a blur of frustrating emails, ignored phone calls, and escalating threats from the HOA. I felt trapped, my simple desire for a home amenity turning into a legal nightmare. The final straw came one sunny afternoon. I had, out of pure defiance and a desperate need to secure Barnaby, erected a temporary, low-cost chain-link fence, intending to quickly replace it once I found a solution. I was in the house on a conference call when I heard the distinct sounds of splintering wood and metal tearing. Rushing outside, my heart pounding, I witnessed Gwendolyn Hayes, flanked by two burly men from HOA-approved demolition crew, directing them to rip down my temporary fence. Barnaby, terrified, was cowering by the back door, whimpering. "This is an unauthorized structure, Mr. Vance," she shrieked over the din of destruction. "Consider this your final warning." My fence, flimsy as it was gone in minutes, leaving my yard exposed and my dog vulnerable. Rage, cold and precise, settled over me. As I stood there, surveying the wreckage, a memory resurfaced, triggered by the sight of my now exposed garden. Weeks ago, a local history buff and amateur drone enthusiast, old Mr. Henderson from down the street, had asked for permission to fly his drone over my property to capture some unique aerial shots of the older houses in the neighborhood for his historical society project. He'd mentioned my house had some interesting original foundations. I'd given him carte blanche, forgotten about it, but now a flicker of hope ignited. What if his drone had been recording? What if he'd captured Gwendolyn's blatant act of destruction? I called him immediately. His voice, crackling with excitement, confirmed my wildest hopes. "Ethan, my boy, you won't believe the footage I got. I was testing my new high-res camera that day, caught everything. Hayes went absolutely ballistic on your little fence. The audio is crystal clear, too. She even said something about making an example of you." My heart hammered with a mix of vindication and a burgeoning audacious plan. This wasn't just about my fence anymore. It was about Gwendolyn Hayes' unchecked power. Unknown to many, my seemingly innocuous property lay directly atop the forgotten historical boundary line of the original Willow Creek land grant, which had been set aside for public parks and community space. Gwendolyn had been quietly pushing for a rezoning variance to build an exclusive private club, the Willow Creek Sanctuary, on that very plot, right next to my land. My presence, my unapproved structures, and any perceived rebellion threatened her application. Her personal vendetta against my fence was merely a tactic to clear the way for a much larger, highly profitable private venture that would usurp public land. Her actions weren't just a petty HOA squabble, they were an abuse of power directly impacting the entire community's shared resources. The thought of this secret project fueled my indignation and, frankly, my mischievous streak. Armed with Mr. Henderson's irrefutable drone footage and fueled by a burgeoning sense of righteous defiance, I decided it was time for a confrontation. But not just any confrontation. I wanted to make a statement, one she couldn't tear down. I hired a specialized construction team, discreetly promising a bonus for discretion and speed. The project commenced under tarpaulins and at odd hours. The very next HOA meeting was set for a sweltering Saturday afternoon in the community clubhouse, and Gwendolyn was holding court, basking in her perceived victory. "Mr. Vance has finally learned his lesson, I trust," she simpered to the assembled residents, "and perhaps he'll now consider a more suitable approach to his property improvements." Just as she was about to elaborate on my supposed compliance, I strode into the room, a large tablet held aloft, projecting Mr. Henderson's drone footage onto the clubhouse's large screen. The video, silent for a moment, showed Gwendolyn directing the destruction of my temporary fence. Then the audio kicked in, clear as a bell. "This is an unauthorized structure, Mr. Vance. Consider this your final warning," followed by her sneering comment, "We need to make an example of this one, clear the path for the sanctuary." A gasp rippled through the room. Gwendolyn, initially stunned, quickly recovered. "That's doctored. A fake. He's fabricating evidence," she shrieked, her face contorting with rage. "This is slander. I'll have you sued for defamation, Mr. Vance. And what's this sanctuary nonsense? More lies." "Actually, Mrs. Hayes, it's not a fake." The calm voice belonged to Eleanor Vance, a formidable investigative journalist from the city's largest newspaper, who stepped out from the back of the room, a microphone in hand. She wasn't related to me, but she had a reputation for exposing corruption. I'd sent her the footage, along with some anonymous tips I'd received about Gwendolyn's zoning applications. I've cross-referenced this footage with multiple aerial photos and witness accounts from other residents who reported similar, shall we say, aggressive enforcement actions by the HOA under your direction. She then pulled out a stack of documents. "And regarding the sanctuary, I have here copies of rezoning applications submitted under your personal foundation's name, seeking to develop a private club on what is currently designated as communal parkland, adjacent to Mr. Vance's property. It appears you've been rather busy." A collective murmur erupted. Gwendolyn's face, already pale, now flushed a mottled red. She stammered, denying everything, pointing fingers, accusing me of conspiring against her. Her arrogance turned to frantic desperation. "This is a witch hunt. A conspiracy," she wailed, but her voice cracked with fear. Eleanor, calm and relentless, continued. "Furthermore, sources within the city planning department have informed me that your rezoning application for the sanctuary included a provision that would have blocked public access to a historic walking trail that runs through that very parkland, a trail that local bird-watching groups and nature enthusiasts have used for decades." This was the second twist, revealing her deeper, darker motivation. Not just profit, but a complete disregard for public good, driven by pure greed and a desire for control. The implications were staggering. The HOA members, many of whom had silently resented Gwendolyn's dictatorial rule but feared her retribution, began to turn. Whispers grew louder, morphing into open questions, then outright accusations. Gwendolyn, cornered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling, finally broke. Her face contorted into a mask of pure terror. She tried to storm out, but Sheriff Thomas, who had quietly entered the room with 2 deputies after receiving a tip from Eleanor, blocked her path. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice grave, "we need to have a word about property destruction, abuse of authority, and some rather serious zoning irregularities." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Gwendolyn. She faced multiple charges, including property destruction, abuse of power, and fraud related to the zoning applications. The HOA board, mortified by the public scandal, swiftly voted to impeach her, stripping her of all authority. Lawsuits from aggrieved residents, previously too intimidated to speak up, rained down on her. Her carefully curated social circle, built on fear and perceived influence, evaporated overnight. She was publicly disgraced, her name now synonymous with corruption and petty tyranny. Her sprawling, immaculate home, once a symbol of her power, became a pariah. As for me, there was a grim satisfaction in seeing justice served, but also a profound weariness from the battle. The conflict had been exhausting, yet it had ignited a spark of creativity. You see, during those weeks of planning my confrontation, I hadn't just been brooding. I had been building. With the help of my chosen team, using the newly cleared and expanded boundaries of my property, I had constructed not a simple picket fence, but a magnificent, towering fortress wall around my entire property line, complete with battlements. A flagpole proudly flying a flag depicting Barnaby's silhouette, and the piece de resistance, a fully functional, remote-controlled wooden drawbridge that spanned my widened driveway, complete with a moat, a decorative, shallow water feature, of course. It was undeniably grand, utterly ridiculous for a suburban neighborhood, and entirely compliant with every actual HOA bylaw, which, it turned out, only specified height and material, not style. It was a defiant, whimsical monument to freedom from overbearing authority. My life returned to its quiet rhythm, though now with a much grander backdrop. Barnaby enjoyed his securely enclosed yard, and my tomatoes flourished. The fortress became a local legend, a quiet testament to the power of pushing back. But it also raises a question: when does defending your right to choose, to build, to simply exist peacefully demand such an extreme, even absurd, act of defiance? What are the true limits of authority, and when do we, as individuals, have a moral imperative to challenge them, even if it means building a fortress with a drawbridge?